The following is a presentation of Morning Drive Media.
From the southernmost point of Dorne to the lands of always winter and west of west and what's going on in the east, this is Casterly Talk. I'm Ken Napzok for another edition. Just me today. I know a lot of you are dying to hear the other voices of the show, like Andrews Cabrera, Lon Harris, Rachel Cushing, and of course, Thomas Risling, Sir Thomas Tall. Don't worry, this show's not going away, and they're not going away either. But with life and schedules and holidays and recording due dates, so to speak, you got me today. And your calls. One of my favorite parts of this show is your voices. Your voices are tremendously important, and we got some great calls lined up today. If you want to leave a call or a little message, as it were, with Casterly Talk, you can do it through Anchor. Just go over to the Anchor app or Casterly Talk's Anchor page on your desktop. Doesn't matter. Plug in a microphone or grab your phone as if you're calling your mom or dad and leaving a nice message. And leave a message. You got 59 seconds to do it. But trust me, that's a lot of time if you allow it to be. Someone who's died on stage in less or 10 seconds or less, you can die on a comedy stage. 5 seconds. Oh, I've seen that. I think 7 seconds is my record, but I've seen less than 5 seconds on stage for others there. Point being, your voices, your calls are very important, and those are coming here in a bit. But I am going to start this show off here just talking about maps. I'm not going in detail on the maps this time, but I really want to do that. But that is something I will need to do with some of the others on the show, because I think we all kind of share that weird, just habit of just pulling out Game of Thrones maps and read them. I'm interested, though, Lon Harris, who's in the middle of a reading, probably the first book, unless he's torn through it, and I don't know. Each book has the maps in front of it, which is immediately just one of my favorite things. You want to pull me into your story. If I grab a book and I flip open to the page, here it is. You hear that sound? Almost ASMR. I have in my hands A Dance with Dragons. But if you, Game of Thrones, I open up and there's a map. Oh, I'm going to study that map. Now, granted, I knew the show before, right? But I picked up finally got the copy. You got that little, you get that 4-pack for a while of the 4 books there. It probably came out before Dance with Dragons, and I have Dance with Dragons. I have all the paperback versions, just easier to read, easier to hold in your hand. You get them, but I got that Game of Thrones book, and here I'm already familiar with the show. Season 1's behind me, getting ready for season 2, and it's like I didn't even read, for 2 days, probably didn't even read a word. I just studied the maps. I love the context of the worlds. I love seeing it. I love imagining all the things going on, and I think a lot of you out there probably feel the same way too, where you are just so pulled in to everything. And it got me thinking, what are your favorite areas of the map to study and wonder about? I find for me, a lot of them are not the places that factor heavily into the show, but it's where I like to kind of put my finger down and go, what's happening there? What are they thinking in Flint's finger? Why all these events are going on? Now, that's not one of my top ones there. I literally just pulled that out of the map here. But I love looking at the map and wondering, all right, so we got the events going on. What are they thinking about it over there in SS? Do they pick up the morning paper over in the Flatlands? Oh, you see what's going on in King's Landing today? New king, apparently. And Robert I, they call him the usurper. He's dead now, slain by a boar. Who's king now? Oh, some young kid. A child, really, a boy. We all know it's Tywin. Pass me that pomegranate. Is that what's going on in the Flatlands? I don't know. It just fascinates me. I love, season 6 when Arya sees Richard E. Grant and everyone, and Lady Crane, of course, doing the play and telling the tales from a very much a certain point of view about what is going on over in Westeros, and how everyone seems to be aware. Everyone's aware of the players. Everyone's aware of the characters. But they don't really know, and how could they? These are the times of ravens, dark wings, dark words, and wrong words. So whatever a playwright over in Essos wants to tell you, that's what you're going to get. Whatever a red priest or priestess wants to tell you, that's what you're going to get. Very truths we cling to, often from a certain point of view. A certain point of view? Yes. So that fascinates me. And one of the answers I don't think we were ever going to get in the show, though we talked about it. And we talked about it a lot here on Casterly Talk because, especially most of us being, not just book readers, but map aficionados, you can't help but wonder. And sometimes want to see. Rachel was very strong on this idea of wanting to see the Night King and his effect and winter coming on down here, reaching everywhere else. What is going on in the Flatlands? Would the Night King even care about that? And, does he have an opinion? Does he want Slaver's Bay or Dragon's Bay, whatever they will be calling it now? Does he want to go there? Does the Night King have an opinion on Valyria and the doom of Valyria? Not really. And I actually, again, totally buy the idea that the Night King is just bent on revenge. You made me, now I want to destroy you. I do like that, but it is fascinating because Westeros becomes rightfully the center of the story. And when I just study these maps, I just look. Valyria, Tolos, Borash. I'm just reading through these here, and right next to Marine, Yunkan, Astapor, we know. Geese, old geese. I love all this stuff. What are they thinking? And in the shadow by Ashai, we talk a lot because there's all these rumors of their own stories and their own legends, and I don't know if we'll ever get that. And again, I didn't expect the show to answer that, and I don't even know if I expect the next book or the final two books to answer that. I don't know if it's meant to, but what's always weird is that I'm staring down here at this map in my hands right now, looking at Sotheros. Do you say it's Sotheros? Sotheros? That's how I say it. I love also going through entire books, not saying a name correct, and then seeing it somewhere and hearing it somewhere and going, oh, Catelyn Stark. I heard a book fan do that. For 15 years, I've been saying Caitlin. But then I also love seeing, this is a side tangent, seeing the creators call, Cersei and Cersei. It's always fun. As a Star Wars fan, let me talk to you about weird names. I'm losing my train of thought here, but I think you know where I'm going. Here's the thought, finishing this thought here. George R. R. Martin, and I look at Sothros, and I know I think I've heard somewhere, it's not as developed as an idea. He just knows that he needs it. And the fact that, is this a flat earth that they're on here? Whereas everything else, Arya's search for West of West is fascinating to me because, and through times of history in this world before, people have wondered, is Westeros it? Does it stop at the shadow? George has such a complete understanding and vision for this world that I wonder if he has some of those answers about what they think of Westeros when they read the papers. Because again, going back to that scene in season 6, or the series of scenes with the play and everything, with Lady Crane playing Cersei and playing it as a sympathetic character, which is interesting because I think Lady Crane is able to tap into some of the truths in Cersei, and Arya probably helps her with that a little bit there, but the West is looked at to me as kind of a joke, right? Oh, Ned Stark, he can be stupid. I'm going to lose my head. It's painful to watch. It's painful for Arya to see that. We also know it's not true, but we have that benefit. So while all this is going on, and they have their traditions and their, their own little mysteries going on and histories over in the East, do they read the morning papers, as I keep saying, and look over West and go, oh, they claim there's some ice zombie coming down with with some warriors. Are those dragons over there? Yeah, good. We don't have to worry about the dragons? Cool. It seems if you're hanging out in Pentos, if you ran away to Pentos, number one, you might be doing well for yourself. Two, you just might not be overly concerned of what is going on in Westeros. It's fascinating. I don't know if we'll ever get that perspective. And I know there was a little bit of a lost opportunity on the show, and I understand the opinion that, we didn't see a lot of the Dothraki's point of view of coming to this country. New world, the first to cross the great saltwater seas there to brave the wooden and iron horses to come over. Yeah, it's an important perspective. I think maybe we could get it in the books. That'd be interesting because that'd be one of the first times. I'm going back to season 1, seeing Khal Drogo not give kind of one damn about what's going on in the West. It's some deal with Illyrio. By the way, side tangent, how Illyrio and Khal Drogo were able to kind of be friendly. I would love to see a little side story. Give me like a 14-page little short story on that one. Illyrio and Drogo. He doesn't care until it affects him personally, until he falls for Dany, until he becomes truly in love with Dany and sees they're trying to kill her, and then he's going to go take this big iron chair for her. That's a pretty powerful moment because to me early on, and perhaps one of the only times in the show, is it someone based in the East giving one damn about the West. Viserys, yeah, you want to be king, whatever. Our army's the best. We'll come over there. We'll conquer. And I think the Dothraki would, if not for the Night King. They could have, made a clean sweep of it all over there. He doesn't care. He doesn't care until it affects him. And that's how most stories work. That's how most people work. But anyone who cared about the West over in the East seems like they had a little skin in the game. Either you left and you just forgot it. You joined the Golden Company. You formed the Golden Company. You formed or joined the Second Sons, and you were an outcast and couldn't go back, didn't want to go back, or you're like, you're a cheesemonger who makes it big. You don't want to go back. If you're in Karth, I think you don't give a damn about going back or making it in Westeros. That's fascinating to me, but I still love that Westeros is the center of the world. So I don't know if I'll ever get these answers. But when I look at the maps, going back to the topic sentence, that's what I think. Do you think that? Do you get lost in this kind of stuff? I mean, we all always do the thing like, I'm going to go to the one north of the wall here. Beyond the Wall. I cannot tell. I am a giant fan of the Mormonts in general. My love from Jorah, for Jorah, Lyanna Mormont in the show, fascinating, obviously. Jorah Mormont was probably one of my favorite characters. That just one of the ones that grabbed me right away. James Cosmo's so great, just an old crusty guy with some story. I was fascinated, even though I knew right away, all right, Jorah Mormont, I get the connection, father, son, there's a history there, and while I was intrigued by Jorah's a little bit more, there was just this like, all right, cool, what makes this old guy run off? He's got land, he's got some prestige, now he's up here running it. Something I respected about it too, same with Aemon. But all that to say, I'm still it's one of those fun things. You guys know I watch this stuff, Star Wars 2. I watch it, it's always in story. And I think that's why I get a little less frustrated with some of the plot decisions or some of the stuff on the show. And you don't see me getting my angry tweet game up because I really do. I call me the biggest nerd in the world. I really do watch these shows and read these stories, and it is a living historical document to me. So I was upset when my man Jorah Mormont, I love that he takes everyone north. I love that he has no choice, but they make a stand at the Fist of the Firstmen. And they need to get out of there. They need to get back because, as he says at the beginning of season 3, everyone you've ever known will be dead or will die. I'm bad with quotes. I don't care. Great moment. But they march back, and I get everyone is hurt. I get everyone is not feeling good. There's the very few survivors, and they do a march. So I look at the map, and I'm like, all right, we get the Skirling Pass. That's where a lot of stuff happens with John and Egret. The Milkwater Rush there. Gosh, the print on these maps is so small, or I'm finally getting that old. They're up there, Corn Half Hand, and obviously in the books there's a lot more that goes on. If you haven't read that yet, I won't spoil it. It plays out a little differently on the show, which I think it needed to. One of those things that I think season 2 does a great job of kind of editing and kind of getting to the point. A lot of the story points that are put forth in Clash of Kings, but they're great in Clash of Kings. But a lot more stuff happens, right? And then you're up in the Fist of the First Men, and then you lose this big battle. And the Fist is to the east of even the Shadow Tower there up the wall. So they head to Craster's Keep, which makes sense. Craster, they don't like him. They're going to house bed down and house themselves there for a little bit. Heal up and head to Castle Black. I get that. Everyone's marching. I still, and I don't know. Again, in story, I'm not questioning this as a plot point. This isn't a sin. Questioning as a plot point. Follow me. The Shadow Tower, one of the working castles, one of the last 3 working castles on the wall, to me, doesn't seem that much farther from the Fist than Craster's Keep, and there's seemingly, it looks like, a known path there. Now, maybe there's a reason they felt they couldn't. Maybe they were pushed towards Craster's Keep. After they lose that war, it's not a mad dash because it can't be. Everyone's hurt. Sam Tarley's crying. I get that. No one's sprinting. They don't have horses left, at least ones that we see. So Craster's a good safe house. And from there, you're not too far from the White Tree, where a lot of them take their vows, Jon Snow included, and then you're not too far of a march to Castle Black. I get it on paper. But on paper, I look at the Shadow Tower, and I'm like, you could get there. I don't care if there's 20 or 100 watchmen there. I forget the exact number. It doesn't matter. There's 5. Open the gates. Let us in. We can rest there. Keep some there. Maybe Jor and some of the commanders head back to Castle Black. Right? Said you go to Craster, and I get it, but once you get there, get the hell out of there. You're so close. I'm looking at this map. Map's right there. You're so close. Leave Craster and his moldy bread behind. Get the hell out of there. And I can understand some of the frustration with Jor, one of my favorite characters. I mean, again, that's the show, right? Characters, leaders make decisions, and then you pay for them, or you succeed via those decisions and with those decisions behind you. It was a fatal decision. I'm not going to say mistake. Again, I think Craster's Keep, if you're going across tough lands, and these aren't roads with a lot of Shell gas stations and pilot love truck stops on the way there. I get it. Run. Let's get out of here. Let's get to Craster. He's not going to harm us. But then they bed down. People were dying. Night's Watchmen were dying. Tough decisions, which is why I love this show. But all this to say, Ken, you're rambling. No, I'm not. Go back to my topic sentence. All of those, I get lost in that. Even if this mic isn't on, and this Rodecaster Pro isn't recording, which is a great machine, by the way, and my laptop's not up, I have these thoughts often. I also play. Do you guys play the "What if so and so stayed alive" game? It's now that the show's over. Specifically to the show, what if Jorah had stayed alive for a couple more, episodes? And I'm not talking about the decisions of the producers. I'm talking in story. He pulls through at the end. Does Dany go the way that she goes? She's had been at odds with Jorah before. She's argued with Jorah before. She hasn't always taken his advice. And sometimes, even if she does, it doesn't go down smooth like a spoonful of sugar. I'm thinking of Astapor, right? Now, Barristan and Jorah did kind of speak out of turn, at least in front of other people. You can have command conversations. You can have, little sidebars. But I agree very much with Dany going, hey, I'm the leader here, and you're chipping away at me while I'm in front of slave masters of Astapor that I'm planning to burn to a crisp. Back off, guys. I understand that call, but what if Jorah had stayed? Would she had gone the way she did? Would it happen at all? Would it happen in some sort of fashion? Definitely Barristan Selmy. And that's the other one thing, too, is I think would some of these wars... Now, they won the long night, so it's kind of a moot point, but... Would there have been a different outcome, a quicker outcome? Would Jorah have been alive? Does it fall like that? Where's Barristan Selmy during the long night? Does he kind of refuse to leave Dany's side? Look, it's my job, my vow to protect you. Or does he help defend the castle walls, defend the gate? Where is he? I love getting lost in that stuff. And a lot of that comes from looking at these maps. I get lost in the maps, and I think a lot of you do too. What are some of the things that you think of when you look at these maps? I want to know. I want you to call. I want you to leave a message. I want you to hashtag Casterly Talk on Twitter, and we'll do it. And I'd love to, again, when some of the others get back for the show here, we're going to do the same type of thing and have a big, fun what-if session. The problem is, this works a lot in Star Wars, a lot of those what-ifs are seen as some sort of tearing down of the story or plot points. And those are fine. Those are different videos and different conversations. I just want to urge fans. I wish I could just sometimes reach through and just grab fans politely by the collar and be like, have a little more fun with this stuff. Do what you did on the playgrounds. I used to do that stuff all the time. All the time. What if Tarkin had stayed alive? Oh, that's not a good thing. The Empire might have won. All those things. And plus, Yavin 4 might have been obliterated. Those are big what-ifs. We might do a big what-if down the line with the spirit of fun, and it can start with your calls coming in. You can reach out and do that. Speaking of your calls, on the other side of this break, we are going to take some great calls. I got 3 lined up that are good, challenging, interesting thought starters. Coming up. Stick around. It's Casterly Talk here. Here on Casterly Talk. I'm Ken Napzok with you all here. We got a couple calls. Couple? That means 2, Ken. We got 3. Excited for these calls. New voice, a new regular voice, and one of my favorite regular voices of all time calling in today. I'm trying to figure out how right now. I'm staring right now at the order of these calls. It is, I have the fate of the gods in my hand. My finger's got the cursor hovering over each one of these calls. Which way do I want to go? It's fascinating radio, Ken. All right, let's go this one. This one from our friend Rocky at the Couch Thoughts Podcast. It's also on YouTube. Check him out.
Hey, Ken and Casterly Talk crew, Rocky here. Wanted to talk briefly about another fantasy series that's being adapted into a live-action show, and that's the Wheel of Time series. So what's interesting about that series is Robert Jordan started the books and then sadly passed away, and then Brandon Sanderson had to come in and finish the series. We talked about a little bit before. Everybody on the internet's talked about it. By all accounts, George is in great health. But God forbid something happened to George. Would you accept anyone else stepping in and finishing the series? And actually, the Brandon Sanderson, the way he finished the series is actually very well received from what I can tell in the Wheel of Time. So would you think anybody else could finish A Song of Ice and Fire? And what would the fallout be of someone else finishing it. Thanks.
You got it, Rocky. Rocky's also my hitting coach when I play MLB The Show on Twitch, and he happens to be in the chat room. He's the one that always reminds me to slow down, take a breath, calm down. I love you, Rocky. Calls always sound so great, probably using your podcasting gear for that here. The Wheel of Time. That's an interesting topic there, too. That'll start coming up a lot more, I think. But there's a main question in that. But I'm mentioning the Wheel of Time first. For those not familiar with the Wheel of Time, and I am, but I've never read them. Partly because I get this all the time, and I think I want to explain it a little bit more here so it doesn't sound too grumpy, especially to anyone who might mention the Wheel of Time. I get a lot of the time like, oh, Ken, you enjoy Game of Thrones. Do you also enjoy this? That's a natural question to ask. I don't ever get upset at that question. I am a Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire fan. I'm not like a high fantasy fan too much. It doesn't mean I can't appreciate it. Obviously, I love the Lord of the Rings movies, all that kind of stuff. Star Wars, which I consider more fantasy than sci-fi. That's splitting hairs, but I'll get a lot. Oh, you like Star Wars? Have you read this sci-fi? Nah. I like Star Wars, and that's me. That's not the case for everyone there. So I don't mean that to sound grumpy, like, get out of here, kid. I don't like no other fantasy dragon stuff. No, I enjoy great stories. And the Wheel of Time is daunting because there's about 20 books, I believe. This is one that began in 1984, I believe. Began writing it, I think published in 1990. I believe you could find some places where George R. R. Martin says this probably has some influence in a way, similar to Tolkien, where just, this was big at the time. And without a doubt, I'm sure there might be a bit of a Song of Ice and Fire that was, his version of Wheel of Time. There's similar things that come up. You can talk about, I think it is, and I do have a Wikipedia page up, so I want to act like I'm completely got a bunch of Wheel of Time knowledge, but there isn't there like a dragon reborn kind of prophecy? I know the main characters are Rand and Matrim and Perrin. I get it all there, and I'm scrolling, trying to find it. There's the Dragon Reborn, so Azor Ahai Reborn, the Chosen One. These are fantasy tropes, so they're going to be there. Wheel of Time was written by an author who went by the name Robert Jordan, James Oliver Rigney Jr., later picked up by Brandon Sanderson after his timely death. So, Wheel of Time's finally coming to TV. I think it is going to Amazon. They've tried for years, and then the estate of Robert Jordan, didn't much like with Tolkien. They don't want to just. And quite frankly, like with George R. R. Martin, they didn't just want the series just to anyone to get it. It's not going to be an ABC movie of the week in 1988 or 92 or whatever, So it's finally coming. I think you can do it now in a large part because of Game of Thrones, not just the success of Game of Thrones. There's copycat stuff for sure. Like any NFL team winning the Super Bowl, you're going to look at their playbook and say, how can we win a Super Bowl with a similar playbook? That's understandable. It's not just that Game of Thrones was a success in terms of creating a stir, pop culture, money. I think when you look at it, and we look at Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings and go, okay, that's what we can do. That's the vibe we can go for. We can play this high fantasy, very straight and very realistic. Treat it with respect in that regard. It's not camp. It's not silliness. Here's what we can do. I think it just makes more sense to do something like the Wheel of Time. I have a friend, Jessica. She's a Game of Thrones fan too, but just a huge Wheel of Time fan. And I at one point just had her explain some of the stuff because I'm never going to read these 20 books. There's no possible way I can get through them. I'm going to have to wait for the TV show, and I'll give it a try if I'm bowled over. But the fandom, they had to deal with this story being finished by someone else. And that's a tough sell. And to Rocky's specific question, relating that to George R. R. Martin, let's first say this. Not only do it seems like George is in good health, and he's a heavier set guy, and what is he, 70 now? His age, he's looked the same to me for so many years that I forget his age. 60, 65, 70, 75, 80 doesn't mean what it used to mean. So I'm not worried about him in any kind of sense. I used to joke, I used to go to Comic-Con a lot and run into him at places and I watch him, down a good plate of wings at the Fox Sports Grill, and I'd kind of be like, George, try the celery and let's get back to writing. But that's out of love. But I shy away from hammering home on that kind of stuff nowadays. But let's put that out there first. Let's put the good vibes of George's not only health, but ability to complete these stories. Maybe you believe the theories that he's completed all of them and he's just sitting on them, like literally has them in boxes and he's sitting on them, waiting to put them out in the world. I don't know. We're going to get the series, but there's always the idea of what if something happens? What if the story keeps going beyond his death and someone else steps in? I'm talking about like another book. Like, let's do an 8th book. George had ideas on an 8th book, and we're going to put it out there. It's an interesting prospect for Game of Thrones fans because I don't think, and the Wheel, I think, Rocky, I think you're right. Wheel of Time fans generally, from what I know, I don't go into Wheel of Time chat rooms, but they generally, I think, are okay with as an average answer, they're okay with what Robert Sanderson did. I could be mistaken, but it's a daunting task, and I do feel as though there's a feel of, hey, those ones are okay. I like it. It is what it is. It had to happen, and at least we got the end of the story. I don't recall having conversations with people going, oh, they're better. Oh, this went way better than expected. It's just tough. Look, even going on with Star Wars. George is still around, George Lucas. That makes it even tougher, but he's the one who's like, I'm cashing out my chips. I got some ideas. You want them? No? All right. Whatever. I'm going to go build a museum, wear some more flannel, and that is tough enough for fans. I love all the new stuff. Some people don't. Some people are okay with it. That was going to happen because that's kind of the same phenomenon. It's a story going on, and the original mind behind it or minds behind it not being a part of it. So you're going to have those questions. I think Song of Ice and Fire fans will have a similar reaction if that has to happen. Again, knocking on wood or IKEA, whatever this is, that this doesn't happen. But that's one of the things, though, going off on a tangent here. I think that's one of the things when you hear Game of Thrones fans saying, like, hey, George, come on, finish the books, is they don't want to have to deal with something this unfortunate. It would be, I want to see, and this is, take the show and put it over there. Show's over in the corner. I want to see the book story, the story, finished by the man that has the notes on it, that has the ideas on it, and that also, more importantly, has the decisions in his brain, decisions that might need to be made when things come up a little bit later on. That, as we saw with Game of Thrones, pulling the show back into the conversation here, is something that we had to deal with. Whether you like decisions or not, I'm fine with them. I love them mostly, and you still have to wonder. Even I, who I like this character's ending. I'm wondering, okay, but what does George have planned? So even someone as positive as me, you're going to have those questions. I know it will be a tough sell. Another one that happens. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Douglas Adams, who passed away. By the way, passes away at 49. Heart attack, working out in Santa Barbara, his adopted hometown after he left the UK. And this is mid-2000s, right? Early 2000s. You're not expecting him to drop at 49. So age and perceived health, be damned. It can happen. And the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series, which was described as a ever-expanding trilogy, already kind of went beyond what was expected of it. So Long and Thanks for All the Fish is the 4th book? And that one wasn't really even supposed to happen. You have Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Restaurant at the End of the Universe, Life, the Universe, and Everything, right? I'm trying to look across to my bookshelf there. And So Long and Thanks for All the Fish comes out, which was kind of it's Douglas Adams, but it's a different take on the story, ends it in a different spot. He comes back, mid-90s, late 90s, with Mostly Harmless, which is the 5th book in the trilogy. This is after the Dirk Gently stuff, which is great and underrated, I think, in a lot of ways. Eon Colfer, who wrote the Artemis Fowl series, comes in after Douglas Adams' death and finishes or writes the 6th book. And as I'm talking here, I'm going to look it up here a little bit, because it's not, I don't like it. And he's a talented writer. So Mostly Harmless comes out in 92. 84 was the wrap-up with So Long, and Thanks for All the Fish. And another thing, the novel, 6th and final installment of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, quote, trilogy. Ian Colfer writes it there, and so here's what, okay, so Adams felt he needed to continue the story. I quote, I suspect at some point in the future I will write a 6th Hitchhiker book, and people said quite rightly that Mostly Harmless is a very bleak book. I would love to finish Hitchhiker on a slightly more upbeat note, so 5 seems to be a wrong kind of number. 6 is a better kind of number. So there you have it. I wasn't as familiar with that behind-the-scenes lore. It wasn't an add-on. It wasn't what's a good idea? It was from some scraps of an idea that Douglas Adams would have got to, or probably would have, he hated deadlines, he would have got to it eventually. They choose a great writer with a great reputation and a great career to come in and finish it. And it just, I'm telling you, it never picked up for me. And I think a lot of fans felt that. And I feel... Adams is such a specific kind of writer with a specific kind of comedy mind. Even having the notes, even having the outline was never going to be a big victory. It was just a tough sell. So that is, in the end, my fear, even more than something like The Wheel of Time, something I'm very familiar with, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Rocky, to your point, as I ramble to an answer, the reason I just know that George R. R. Martin's going to finish this story. And that's what's going to make us the most happy. Right, George? Get to typing. All right. Question here. We got this one from our good friend, Eric Monroe.
Hey, Ken, Casterly Talk. So one thing about the series finale, one outcome I really didn't like is Bran becoming king. Now, admittingly, I'm not a big Bran fan. He's not a character that's ever really compelled me. I'm not crazy about him in the books. I remember when I first read the books, his chapters were the only ones I really looked ahead to see how many more pages I had. But, I accept it. He's the king, and I totally agree with what you, Ken, and what others have said. I definitely think it definitely came from George R. R. Martin, so I'm definitely going to expect it and be prepared for it to come to happen in the books. But you know what? I've realized as some time has gone on, it's okay. It's okay if I don't like that plot point. It doesn't mean I don't like the show. It doesn't mean I'm going to hate the books if he becomes king. There's just some things we love and some things we don't love. And Bran, for me, becoming king is just one plot point I'm probably never going to like.
Eric is being honest, and that's what I love, because Eric is a fan who absolutely loves this stuff. And I think it's always important to remind ourselves that it was, as fans, and I'll say it again and again and again, I'll say it here in Casterly Talk, I'll say it on Force Center, I'll say it at the bus stop if you run into me. You can have a problem with a plot point. You can have a problem with a character. You can have a problem with the decisions of the creators, the producers, the writers, the authors. You can, and you can still love it. And I know that's what Eric does. He loves this stuff. As far as Bran and King Bran, I too share a similar, sometimes just to Bran, which isn't actually fair to Bran, the character. Isaac Hempstead White, great job. No problem with that. I think he when your acting note for most of your time on the show is just sit in the chair and not care. That's tough to pull off, and I think he does it. I've always been a fan, and he and Hodor have just a great relationship, and we know where that goes. How painful that was for us there. But it's not fair to the character of Bran, but it's not. Eric is not the only one that probably shares this opinion, and I'm not even talking about King Bran. Now, as far as the idea of King Bran, time will tell if that works or holds up. Going back to what I say in terms of just watching it, listening, and paying attention to it as a real story that folds out in front of you, I have to go, okay, why? Why did this work? Because I wasn't, when it happened, I kind of went, all right. And you can go back to our reviews and figure it out. I was like, all right, I didn't see that coming. In fact, on a lot of our previews, I think going back, not counting the season that Bran stepped out, a lot of it towards the end was in doing preview shows, whether it was for Collider or Screen Junkies or hearing Casterly Talk by ourselves, this idea of like, well, how does Bran factor into the story? What is it? What is it? Is it him and the Night King? Is he going to sacrifice himself for the Night King? And that makes sense because him and the Night King, the connection was a driving plot point. And turns out he's a big piece of bait, and I actually like that. We all focused that way. Not everyone, maybe just me. We all focused that direction. Bran, his place in the story has to do with the Night King, and it does. And it does. But I guess when you stop and think about it, him as the king is a great comment, perhaps from George R. R. Martin himself, perhaps just from the producers of the show, time will tell, about what the best king or queen, of course, would be made of. What kind of person should rule? One who is not concerned with the power. He gives the reins to Tyrion, someone who, I don't know if he's... Tyrion is someone at one point that was concerned with the power, but he's gone through enough to where he understands responsibilities. He's good at it. He might want to rule, but not necessarily want the power. In fact, I still am in the camp that this is kind of a punishment for Tyrion. Bran's saying, cool, you run it. I got more important things to do. Enjoy those sleepless nights. But again, I think Bran gets a bad rap. And I'm one of the people that have given him a bad rap, particularly with the books. Eric said it himself. When you read those sections in the books, those are one of the sections, and there's a few. Not even all the... It's not even like this character's not someone I flip ahead in the pages or this... It sometimes can be down to this specific chapter, at least with me as a reader. But Bran is one of the characters that I do the how many pages I got left thing too. Eric, you and I are very similar in that regard. But again, I'm pointing fingers at me here. That's just not fair to Bran. He got pushed out because he's a rambunctious kid, got pushed out of a tower. And so his story begins. And, he's really kind of the first character we kind of really dig into, right? And he goes on this spectacular, wonderful, crazy mission that unravels a lot of mysteries and presents mysteries and answers questions and doesn't answer questions. And he's kind of a fun exposition character, but it's also a peek into the history and it's mystery and it's very high fantasy. It's tremendously interesting stuff, but unfortunately, for a lot of times, he's just being carried or in a chair or a sled and learning. That's why the producers of the show, I at the time I was upset, which is weird. It's so weird because I'm not a huge Bran fan, right? But when I find out, hey, Bran's not in, was it season 5? It's like, what do you mean? You can't take Bran and Hodor and the Reeds or Mira at least away from us for a whole season. So even then, I guess I like Bran more than I cared to admit. But it makes some sense, right? This isn't going to Yoda and getting some lessons and moving on. This isn't a movie. To continuously cut back to Bran in season 5, because you do it in 6, and it works in 6. But to do that in season 5, I think it would have even added to the kind of rising contempt for the character, or at least his storyline. I don't have the perfect answer on Bran as a king, Eric. I still go back to this idea that Sansa was a better fit in terms of what we already knew as a king or queen and the standards that she would have just shot past, actually, and created new standards for. Sansa would have been the choice that made sense, but I do believe the wheel was broken, and so Bran as king is part of that wheel breaking. Because he stated it. He doesn't want it. I think, though, he feels he has to. I think that might be why he's like, yeah, why do you think I did all this? I need to be the ruler because all y'all ain't gonna break no wheels. So the guy with wheels on his chair, he's coming down. I'll take it. You guys go do other things. And I think there's greater symbolism to me, greater importance to Sansa. And I've said this before. I apologize for the broken record nature of this, but it's a better thing for Sansa to go be the queen who rose, as I like to say, as Torrhen Stark's the king who knelt. I think that's something that's going to play. I think that plays out similar in the books. That's a prediction. I don't know. Because the North and South, but the North is an ideal, and the North remembers, and Starks and Stark blood and old blood and the old men, the first men, and all these things. It all just has great meaning, and for there to be a return of not just this power, but this legacy. This legacy that it was erased 300 years ago, but we got thousands of years of this North legacy, and the Starks and the Stark legacy, the Stark and Winterfell. So I think it's much more interesting that Sansa brings that all back, that she is the queen in the North, and that the wheel breaks in a lot of places, and the wheel is broken in a lot of places, but that this kind of little wheel or this spoke is back up, and then Sansa will handle that well, just like I think she'd be the best queen of the Seven Kingdoms. I think she's the best choice to be queen of the North, and it's just fun for me as a fan to go, yes, she's the one that brought it back. Whereas Bran's like, yeah, that's more important. I'll take this one down here. People kind of need that. Tyrion's got it. And I think that's a statement. I think there's more meaning to it than a lot of us, and myself included. Lon and I used to put into Watching Thrones the odds, and that's on almost every podcast that covers Game of Thrones during that thick seasons 3, 4, and 5, when Game of Thrones was just, the fan base was really, really invested. I'm not talking about just rating numbers, but it, 1, ooh, you like Game of Thrones. 2, oh, it's good. All right, a little darker season. All right, cool. But hey, we got more. And then 3, it was like, who's going to win? Dany's got an army. She's coming back. What are the odds? Lon and I used to play that game. That's water cooler conversation. But I think sometimes we all maybe got caught up in that. Who's our choice for king or queen? Who's our choice? Lay down your bets. And here comes Bran, the dark horse that we probably should have always been paying attention to. Instead, we're just flipping ahead in those pages. Eric, great thought starter. I have a lot of thoughts on that. I'm working through it. If you listen to the segment here, if you just got through it with me, I'm working through things. And that's part of being a fan too. You can work through things and come to different decisions and see how it plays out and see how you like it after you look at it a second time. Final thought and call from the day. We got a new voice checking in. Say hello to Tani.
Hi, Ken. This is Tani from Chicago. And first off, thank you so much for continuing to do this podcast. I absolutely love listening to them. It helps keep the fandom alive in my heart. So I wanted to get your thoughts on the legacy of Game of Thrones. Do you think the lackluster final season has killed some of the flame of the fandom? I only ask because there are a lot of people I talk to who were burned by the last season, that they've either decided they're done with the world or they're not interested in getting into it because of the ending. Do you think it will have the longevity like, say, Star Wars, for example? Since Star Wars has TV shows, movies, books, etc., is it still too early to tell for Game of Thrones? Or will it be relegated to some of the great TV shows from the past that no longer have a place in pop culture, but just like a footprint? I see the irony in asking this to a Game of Thrones podcast, but I'd be interested to hear your thoughts as you're also a Star Wars expert. Thanks, Ken.
Oh, Tani, you're too kind. I'm just a professional appreciator of Star Wars. This is a great question. This is one that I'm going to try to discuss here, but the answer is going to come again and change, and we're going to have the ability to look back. And I also definitely can't wait to get some of the others on this, too. The legacy of Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, the show, and Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, the property, the IP, the fandom, the world, all of it. What will be the legacy? Yep, easy answers. Always going to be. Time will tell. But I definitely understand. Tawny makes some great comparisons to some big shows in the past. All right, Sopranos, Breaking Bad, Lost. At the time, Sopranos is a show. I've seen a few episodes in the background. I've never sat down to really watch them. I didn't even have an HBO subscription back in the day. One of my old roommates, though, would watch. I think would rewatch the show like 5 times in the time they would live together. Just I'd come home and they'd be on, so I'd catch them in, and it's great stuff. The late great Gandolfini was just that great. I got it. But it's interesting because that passed in a way. Where that was one of those shows of, hey, what you watching Sopranos? Hey, did you see last night's Sopranos? And you couldn't escape it. You couldn't escape it. Like a lot of great shows, Game of Thrones included. It comes out. There's a dedicated fan base. It's big yet still small, and then it grows and grows and grows. More people fall into it, and then it has a controversial finale. I mean, come on. It's a great comparison because will this be like that? Seinfeld, Cheers, going to sitcoms, and it's a different ball game a little bit, but it's pop culture stuff. It's the zeitgeist. It's like Seinfeld was everything. Cheers was at one point everything. And I don't mean this as a generational crappy humor type of thing here, but I run into a lot of fans, people I work with. When I say fans, like fans of TV and pop culture. And these are people I work with on shows and podcasts who they weren't around. They weren't old enough for Seinfeld, for understanding every Friday morning at school for me and in high school and into college was let's drop the best Seinfeld quotes and jokes from last night's episode. It's now into our conversation. It's now something that's part of it. And now kind of fades away as part of this 90s time capsule. Cheers, Cosby Show, a lot of those type of programs fade away, and they have their place and they have their purpose and their legacy, but that's what they are. They're back then. Will there be a documentary of a VH1 CNN documentary on the 2010s, and will Game of Thrones be featured prominently in it? Absolutely. It will be part of that time capsule. What will make it go on, like Star Wars or Star Trek? Let's not forget that, which was at one point just something that was this great little nugget of an important show locked in a 60s time capsule. And then, all right, Star Wars is big, and let's try to do something here. And nope, now we're doing movies, and nope, we got Next Generation. And I think Star Trek goes from something in the rearview mirror that was important to a lot of people, that never faded for a lot of people. Hear me out there, but all of a sudden kept going and then grew. Star Wars was like that as well. Game of Thrones has 2 things going for it, as opposed to some of these other shows like Sopranos, Lost, first couple seasons of Survivor, where everyone's talking about it, but then it fades away. And never losing its respect or its place in history, but the fervor dies. Tawny jokes this is a Game of Thrones podcast, and it's still going after the show has ended, and that's my first point. The show has ended, but the love of the world, the need to dive into the world, the need and the desire to have conversations and get a little more explained about the world and learn a little bit more and to explain to others a little more, that's still there. And the books are still going. And then this prequel series coming out. If this works on every level, and I know it cannot work, and it will not work. I'm saying that now. Will not work to the level of HBO's Game of Thrones. HBO's The Long Night Part 1, whatever they're calling it. I don't care. I didn't read a lot of the spoilers that popped up recently. It will not work the same way. It just can't. And I saw an interview with George R. Martin recently about that. And I have to catch up on the George R. Martin interview on the Maltons podcast. I'm fascinated. I saw the big kind of story that was making the rounds of him calling kind of some parts of modern fandom madness. That's some truth there, and I want to hear more of that. I got to tell you, I think Game of Thrones has a chance, Tawny, to continue on. Will it be as Star Wars is a lot different. Having just written the book Why We Love Star Wars, it connects to something bigger, which is not just the quote kid in all of us, but our hopes, our thoughts, our fears, our meanings, and it does it in such a simple and direct way that it pulls in more people and will continue to pull in more people. Game of Thrones, you're not going to show a 7-year-old Game of Thrones. I mean, you can. It's your call, your kid. Do what you want. But you know what I mean? Like, Star Wars is going to always be there for a lot more people, generation after generation, where Game of Thrones, the show, the memories of the show, the legacy of the show will fade just a little bit. It already has. It's the ending, and Tawny talked about in her call here, how the ending has affected some people's love of the show, how it's made them not want to get into it. Yeah, that's going to happen, and it's just, again, I'm going to Sopranos finale, the Seinfeld finale. That's the end. I think the Cheers finale was one of the biggest finales I remember. I also remember the MASH finale. I remember my parents watching that. The Cheers finale was big. I mean, that was a big countdown, a pregame countdown show with Costas, the cast live and very drunk on Leno and The Tonight Show back then. I mean, it was a thing, right? And I think most people were satisfied. It was a very good ending, touching ending. I thought it was really good. Cheers finale gets lost. All right, let's do a Cheers podcast. Game of Thrones suffered from what a lot of shows suffer from. How do you end it? How do you take it home? How do you make everyone happy? You can't. So yeah, that's going to fade the luster a little bit. The glory is going to fade a little bit, but I think it will pick up again over time, and I think it's going to have these bursts of enthusiasm. I go back to the days of Star Wars in the late 80s. I joke sometimes it's the dark days of Star Wars. It was a weird time of my youth because I am growing up and I am supposed to put this stuff behind. And I had this weird, we all had the sense of, it's for kids now. Put it up on the shelf. And there was nothing new coming down the pipeline. Games and figures and all those kind of things existed and were very important. The West End games come to mind. Zon's Out of the Empire novel comes out and it starts to reignite a fan base. By then, early 90s, George is starting to think about things. By 94, he's writing ideas down for what would be the prequels. But during the late 80s, Star Wars still had the legacy of something that changed the world, still had a legacy of something that you knew about, loved, and studied, had a passion for, a fervor, but it was in the rear view mirror. And it's sometimes weird to think about it, even for me to go back and remember it that way, but it was. Star Wars was a quiet, shared conversation with friends in high school, early high school. It's like, oh yeah, you made a reference to Star Wars. You like that story? You like Star Wars too? That's it? Oh, okay. You connect with a friend that way. But you weren't going, you want to come over tonight and watch Star Wars? Do you want to come over tonight and, have a podcast about Star Wars? That has changed the game too. We'll come back to that. Star Wars was a huge part of my life. But by 1988 and 89, it was something way far on the other end, to bring it back to the beginning, of the map. It comes exploding back in, and pop culture changes. And then by the late 90s, I started to feel like, can I put some of this stuff back on the shelf? And then podcasts. So you mentioned, Tawny, Casterly Talk goes on. That changes everything. By 2012 and 13, podcasts had already been around. We get all that. But by 2012 and 2013, this is a world you can keep playing in. And that is why the Star Wars folks and the legacy of Star Wars feels, I think, even bigger now. And then you got folks like me writing about their 40 years experience with this. Dark times, good times, great times, all of those times. And it's something you can look back and talk about and you hear about. A lot of the feelings and things I have as a Star Wars fan, I had in 1988. I just didn't have anyone to talk to about it. I didn't have anywhere to talk to about it. Anywhere to talk about it. So Game of Thrones, the show, will definitely fade. It definitely will be something in the rearview mirror, but I don't mean folks like me in a cynical, disparaging way, but we'll always have this. So it's always going to feel bigger, as it should. You don't have to leave the map. You don't have to roll up those maps. The maps are still there. You can still play in this world. You can still learn from it. I go back and I learn things in Return of the Jedi now that I did not and I could not have learned in 1983. And so shall it be with Game of Thrones. The glory will fade a little bit. Even the anger will fade a little bit. Hopefully, thankfully, fortunately. But Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire, the legacy will be alive if we want to keep it alive. And that's why Casterly Talk will still be going. So happy to talk with you all today. Thank you for your calls. Tani, thank you for calling from Chicago. Rocky at the Couch Thoughts Podcast. Eric Monroe. More coming the next couple weeks. Probably still me the next couple weeks because San Diego Comic-Con's coming up. A lot of people traveling. Looks like I'll be moving studios here in a bit. So, stick with me. It might be my voice for a little bit. Okay. I hope you don't hate that, but we'll get some more people in here because I need not just the voices of those you've already heard on the show, but people that I've talked Game of Thrones with elsewhere. I've been talking to those folks, trying to get them in. And maybe, who knows, maybe one day I'll start a Wheel of Time podcast too. I am kidding. Maybe, I don't know. All right, before I get out of here, I want to talk some business here. If you are local to California or you just like traveling for fun events, August 24th, Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. There will be a screening of it in my hometown of Arroyo Grande, California, presented by the Central Coast Film Society. This will be a big event at the Clark Center. The Clark Center, it's like a big community performing arts center there on my old high school campus. A lot of fun. You can go to centralcoastfilmsociety.org for more information or to get tickets. Just look it up, and I will be there as a kind of a big guest of not honor, but a guest of nerddom, sitting there doing a Q&A, a book signing, VIP experience, and just watching Star Wars on the big screen with everybody. Going to be exciting. August 24th. Check it out. Presented by the Central Coast Film Society. So, hey, maybe one day we'll do something for Game of Thrones too, man. Maybe we can do that. Imagine that. Come on, we'll binge all the episodes. Just buy a ticket and we'll live here in the theater. We'll work on that. All right, that is it. You can follow me at Ken Napzok. You can like Casterly Talk on Facebook. Follow us on the Anchor app. That's where you can get, or just on the Anchor desktop. You can leave a message, have your voice heard. We are on Spotify, like 12 total places. So if you're listening to it on some place you don't like to listen to it, look for it on your favorite podcast location. All right, we roll on. I can't wait to talk more Game of Thrones with you. That's Casterly Talk for this week. See you, my friends. Bye.